Hey everybody out there, this is Seto, and today for you guys we're going to talk about a topic that I think to some degree always ruffles people's feathers, and that's floodgates. Yes, those things that we think are sometimes a necessary evil and some people think are not a necessary evil. Now me, I'm okay with floodgates because I've been playing this game for a long time and I feel like there's usually always an out to a floodgate. However, other people think differently, and that is perfectly fine. But today I'm going to talk about a topic where I'm going to show you guys that floodgates have actually been in the game for a very, very long time. Ever since the creation of Yu-Gi-Oh! Pretty much, floodgates have been around in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! A lot of people that have only been playing this game for maybe a couple years, even 5 years, will tell you that floodgates, some of these people will tell you that floodgates actually are something that has only happened recently because Yu-Gi-Oh! Has become so fast-paced. However, coming from a player and looking back with hindsight, which you have to do, keep in mind, is always 20/20, but looking back on the game of Yu-Gi-Oh!, floodgates have been around for a long time. So what are some of the early floodgates in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh? Well, first off, you have Imperial Order, which just recently came off the ban list over in the OCG land with an errata, which literally back in the day was a floodgate, and I think was one of the most earliest forms of a floodgate in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! If you really think about it. It stopped pretty much all spell cards from activating by just paying a measly, cost. That card was in the game for about 3 years, I think it was, 2 years, 2.5, something like that. But it was out in the game for a very long time because I remember it came out of Metal Raiders, I believe it was. And people play that card as a staple until the ban list banned it in 2004, I remember. That card was a floodgate. No ifs, ands, or buts. That's kind of like an earliest anti-spell fragrance, except you can't even activate the spell cards. Another early floodgate card that people really don't know unless you played back then was Jinzo. Jinzo was one of the most... If there was a poster boy for floodgates back in 2004, 2005, it was Jinzo. Hands down. Because traps were so important back in the game, the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Traps could change the momentum of a duel. That's why a lot of the good traps from back in those days were actually banned or limited. Like Ring of Destruction, Mirror Force was that one. There was a lot of good traps out there that were just limited to one, and traps could change the momentum of a duel. And if you slapped a Jinzo down when your opponent had 3 back row, you had to pray that, you as the player that had the Jinzo summon on them, had to pray that you actually were going to draw a Book of Moon or something to put that Jinzo in defense position to get rid of it. Because literally, Jinzo was a walking floodgate for traps when traps were more prevalent in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! It was literally a floodgate in monster form. Kind of like an early version of Dinko Sekka, I guess you could say. Even though Dinko Sekka is more cold wave, they share some similarities. Another floodgate, which people don't really consider, but it has been in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! For a long time, and I distinctly remember in 2004 when, and even later on when different Chaos variants came around, but definitely in 2004 when Chaos Swarm, or things with BLS, Chaos Emperor Dragon, all those that set of Invasion of Chaos came out, and light and dark monsters became prevalent, and banishing things from your graveyard to special summon big beaters was a thing. One of the big floodgates back then was freaking Necro Valley. People don't talk about Necro Valley. Necro Valley has been around for over 10 years. One of the original field spell cards that was actually a floodgate form because it prevented you from banishing things. If you had a Necro Valley on the field and your opponent drew a BLS, that BLS or Chaos Emperor Dragon or Chaos Sorcerer or, that was a dead card to them. They couldn't use it till they got rid of the Necro Valley. So literally it was a walking floodgate. Another floodgate that was similar to Necro Valley that nobody talks about was Kaiku. Kaiku's been around just as long as Necro Valley, people. People don't understand that. And people even nowadays when they're playing Dark Magician are bringing the Kaikus out just as a mini floodgate to stop things like ABCs from banishing and things of that nature. So Kaiku's been a walking monster floodgate. Kaiku was kind of always like the Necro Valley monster form, but people played Kaiku in 2004 Chaos, and later on even because you would banish the lights and darks from grave and they couldn't even touch their graveyard to begin with, so they had to get around that Kaiku before they could even do anything, and it was a dark target on a plus of that. I mean, I remember people legitimately talking back in 2004 that Kaiku may be limited to 1 because it was such a powerful floodgate-ish card because it stopped the graveyard, you know, pretty much, and also it banished things from the graveyard, and it was a dark attribute for light and darkness decks. So back in those days, it was pretty good. So yeah, the Floodgates have been around for a long time in Game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Those are just some of the early versions of Floodgates, like Jinzo and all that, but there have been a lot of them. And people have been playing them in the Game of Yu-Gi-Oh! For a very, very long time. And there have even been a lot of Floodgates, or just Floodgate as cards that have come out since then. And people, when I hear people say, well, Floodgates are a new thing in the Game of Yu-Gi-Oh! And Floodgates haven't always been in the Game of Yu-Gi-Oh! That is not true. I literally just pointed out 6 versions of Floodgates that people would legitimately use back in the day, and I remember using myself off the top of my head. So Floodgates have always been around the Game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Are they a good thing or a bad thing? That is up to debate, I guess you could say. I think, you know, they've always been, if they've always been around in the Game of Yu-Gi-Oh! And this game is going on what? 14 years over here in the TCG, I guess we can live with it because they've been around forever. Konami deals with them if they become too powerful, it seems like. But otherwise, they've been in the game for a long time, and they've always helped out against meta-defining decks. So take your good with your bad, or just say screw it and don't do it. So it's up to you. But me, I think Floodgate's been around in the Game of Yu-Gi-Oh! For a long time, and I think it's okay. Whatever. But that's just my opinion. I played this game for a long time, so I have opinions, I guess you could say. But tell me what you think about Floodgates, guys. And definitely, if this video tells you anything, Floodgates have always been around the Game of Yu-Gi-Oh! It is not a new thing. If people tell that to you, just tell them these cards have been out in the beginning of Yu-Gi-Oh! They were Floodgates. What's the difference? So, till next time, guys, take care. Have fun dueling. Good luck dueling. And I'll see you guys next time. And take care, everybody. Good luck dueling to all of you.